A very sad case involves a lead plaintiff by the name of James Vance that was brought against Judas Priest and their label CBS Records. Judas Priest was a groundbreaking heavy metal band formed in Birmingham, England in 1969, famous for their music and going into the mainstream and their leather rock and roll gear, studs, and so on and so forth. They had a very fervent following that included Raymond Belknap and James Vance. Both Belknap and Vance were, for lack of a better word, troubled individuals, and they spent 6 hours getting stoned and drunk, listening to the Stained Glass album. And in particular, there was a song, Better by You, Better Than Me, which was a cover of a 1969 Spooky Tooth song. After this afternoon and evening of drinking, Belknap and Vance entered into a suicide pact, got a shotgun, went out into a field. Belknap put the gun to his jaw and died instantly. Vance did the same thing, except he blew half of his face off and did not die immediately. That is, 3 years later, he did die. 25 years ago is a very long time. And in fact, the anniversary of the lawsuit that was brought by the parents of Vance and Belknap went on for a month in Reno. And the allegation was that there were subliminal messages encouraging suicide within the song. Subliminal messages like Paul's a dead man on Sgt. Pepper's, or a couple of frames showing hot buttered popcorn during the movies. You would think that the case would have been thrown out of hand, but it wasn't. And in Rolling Stone this month, Rob Halford looked back at being in trial for over a month in Reno 25 years ago, and what it did to his mental state. He and the band stayed several miles outside of town in order to keep away from the paparazzi and provide support for one another. And in a really poignant piece, he just said he really just wanted to hug the parents of these two victims of this tragedy, who obviously were big fans. You think that winning a lawsuit as a defendant is winning, but it's not winning if you have to pay lawyers to be in trial for over a month, and that's what happened. Fortunately for Judas Priest, CBS Records paid for the defense. It was also a defendant, and it raised very, very serious issues if, in fact, this whole subliminal message theory had gained any traction. Holford testified that the duet was actually him exhaling over a guitar chord. It was not a jury trial, it was a court trial. And ultimately, the court dismissed the case, finding that the subliminal messages weren't there at all. The trial attracted a great deal of attention. And in fact, there was a 1991 documentary, Dream Deceivers, the story behind James Vance versus Judas Priest. And there also was an article for Skeptical Inquirer chronicling the trial by Dr. Timothy Moore. Judas Priest most certainly has never forgotten the burden that they were placed through. And from their attitude, they were English rockers that loved America, and I didn't understand how they could be held to trial for that length of time. John Belcher, Vance versus Judas Priest, the continuing series of Rock and the Law.